5 foods are sitting in the average American kitchen right now, and cardiologists consider at least one of them more dangerous to your arteries after 50 than a cigarette. Heart disease kills 1 in 4 Americans. It is the leading cause of death for both men and women in this country, and it has been for over a century. But the rate of first heart attacks in adults between 50 and 65 has climbed 32% in the last decade alone. That the number is not moving in the wrong direction because people are eating more red meat and butter. It is moving in the wrong direction because the foods that replaced them were never as safe as the labels claimed. The foods on this list are not exotic. They are not rare ingredients from a specialty store. They are in the pantry, the refrigerator, and on the table of virtually every household in the United States. Most of them carry health claims on the packaging. Some of them have been recommended by government agencies for decades, and the damage they cause does not announce itself. There is no pain, no warning, no signal until the arterial narrowing reaches a threshold your body can no longer compensate for. Before we get to food number 3, there is one item on this list that cardiologists have a specific clinical name for, not a colloquial name, a clinical term they use in the operating room and in peer-reviewed journals to describe the exact mechanism by which this food destroys your coronary arteries from the inside. It is a process that begins silently, years before you feel any symptoms, and by the time most people discover it, the damage is already significant. You will know exactly what that term means, what it describes, and whether the food causing it is in your kitchen before this video ends. Food number 1, seed oils. Canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, safflower oil. These are collectively referred to as seed oils, and they make up the overwhelming majority of cooking oils sold in the United States today. Walk down the cooking oil aisle of any grocery store, and roughly 80% of what you see falls into this category. For 5 decades, beginning in the late 1960s, the American Heart Association recommended these oils as a heart-healthy alternative to saturated fat. The logic seemed sound at the time. Seed oils are low in saturated fat and high in polyunsaturated fat, and the prevailing hypothesis was that saturated fat caused heart disease. Replace one with the other and the problem should improve. But in 2013, a landmark randomized controlled trial published in the British Medical Journal reanalyzed data from a major study conducted in the 1970s called the Minnesota Coronary Experiment. That study had followed over 9,000 patients for up to 4.5 years, replacing saturated fat in their diets with seed oils rich in linoleic acid. The original researchers had never published the full results. When the recovered data was finally analyzed, the findings were striking. Replacing saturated fat with seed oils did not reduce deaths from heart disease. In patients over 65, the group that replaced the most saturated fat with seed oil had a 62% higher risk of death than the group that did not. The reason comes down to chemistry. Seed oils are between 50 and 80% linoleic acid by composition, depending on the specific oil. Linoleic acid is an omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid, and polyunsaturated fats are chemically unstable. The multiple double bonds in their molecular structure make them highly susceptible to oxidation, particularly when exposed to heat. When you cook with seed oils, the linoleic acid oxidizes and breaks down into a class of compounds called aldehydes. Specific aldehydes produced in this process include 4-hydroxynonenal malondialdehyde, both of which are toxic to human cells at low concentrations. What aldehydes do inside your body is damage the endothelium, the single-cell thick inner lining of your arteries that regulates blood flow, blood pressure, and clot prevention. Once the endothelium is damaged, oxidized LDL particles, the small, dense cholesterol particles associated with arterial plaque, have a surface to adhere to. After 50, your body's antioxidant defenses decline significantly. Your cells produce less glutathione and less superoxide dismutase, 2 of the primary compounds your body uses to neutralize oxidative damage. That means the same amount of aldehyde exposure that a 30-year-old clears with minimal consequence accumulates in an older adult and creates progressive, compounding injury to the arterial wall. Therefore, if you are cooking with canola oil or soybean oil every single day, you are introducing a source of vascular injury with every meal. The replacement is straightforward: extra virgin olive oil for low-heat cooking and for dressings. Its primary fat, oleic acid, is a monounsaturated fat that is chemically stable and does not oxidize at normal cooking temperatures. Avocado oil for high heat cooking, as it has one of the highest smoke points of any natural oil and is also predominantly monounsaturated. Butter from grass-fed cows for baking and stovetop use. Grass-fed butter contains higher concentrations of vitamin K2 and conjugated linoleic acid, a naturally occurring fat that research has linked to reduced cardiovascular risk when consumed in whole food form. The transition takes 1 week. You use up what you have, you replace it when it runs out, but the food at number 2 is doing damage of a different kind, and for many people it is the first thing they eat in the morning. Food number 2, processed meats. Deli turkey, ham, bacon, sausage, hot dogs, salami, pepperoni, prosciutto, any meat product that has been cured, smoked, salted, or chemically preserved. A study from the Harvard School of Public Health, one of the largest dietary analyses ever conducted, followed over 100,000 men and women across multiple decades and found that eating 1 serving of processed meat per day, defined as roughly 2 slices of deli meat or 1 hot dog, raised the risk of heart disease by 42%, not over a lifetime of heavy consumption, a single daily serving, 42%. 2 specific compounds produce the majority of this damage. The first is sodium nitrate. Sodium nitrate is used as a preservative in virtually all commercially cured meats because it inhibits bacterial growth, particularly Clostridium botulinum, and it gives cured meats their characteristic pink color. Inside the human body, sodium nitrate is converted by gut bacteria and by the acidic environment of the stomach into nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are among the most well-documented carcinogens in food chemistry research, but their cardiovascular impact is equally serious. They attack the endothelium directly, triggering inflammation and impairing the endothelium's ability to produce nitric oxide, the compound your arteries use to relax and dilate. When nitric oxide production drops, blood pressure rises, and the risk of clot formation increases. The second compound is sodium. The sodium content in processed meats is not incidental. It is structural. A single serving of deli turkey, which is considered one of the leaner and healthier choices in the processed meat category, contains between 400 and 600 milligrams of sodium. A single slice of bacon contains approximately 200 milligrams. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day for adults over 50 because aging kidneys become progressively less efficient at excreting excess sodium, leading to fluid retention, increased blood volume, and elevated blood pressure. 2 slices of bacon and 3 slices of deli turkey, and you have already consumed over 1,000 milligrams of sodium before you have eaten anything else. But the consequences extend beyond cardiovascular damage on its own. A meta-analysis published in the journal Circulation reviewed data from over 400,000 participants across multiple countries and found that processed meat consumption was independently associated with a 67% higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Diabetes then compounds cardiovascular risk by damaging small blood vessels throughout the body, impairing kidney function, and accelerating the progression of atherosclerosis. The combination of processed meat consumption and the diabetes risk. It creates a compounding cycle that cardiologists consider one of the most serious dietary patterns they see in patients over 50. Many people in this age group eat processed meats several times a week, under the assumption that choosing turkey over beef makes it a healthy choice. The research does not support that distinction. The preservation method, not the source animal, is what generates the cardiovascular risk. A fresh turkey breast and a smoked turkey breast are not the same food from the perspective of your arteries. Food number 3, white bread and refined carbohydrates. White bread, white rice, regular pasta, most breakfast cereals, crackers, bagels, muffins, flour tortillas, and the majority of packaged snack foods. These are refined carbohydrates, meaning the grain has been processed to remove the bran and the germ, the 2 components that contain nearly all of the fiber, the B vitamins, the minerals, and the germ. Antioxidants. What remains after processing is the starchy endosperm, which is composed almost entirely of rapidly digestible carbohydrate. Inside your digestive system, refined carbohydrate behaves almost identically to pure sugar. A study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association followed over 12,000 adults across a 20-year period and found that those in the highest quartile of refined carbohydrate consumption had a 33% higher risk of cardiovascular disease compared to those in the lowest quartile. A separate analysis published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which pooled data from over 500,000 participants across 17 studies, found that each additional serving of refined grains per day was associated with a 6% increase in cardiovascular disease risk, independent of other dietary factors. The mechanism that matters most specifically for adults over 50 involves triglycerides. When you consume refined carbohydrates, your blood glucose rises rapidly, and your pancreas releases insulin to manage that rise. Any glucose that cannot be immediately used for energy is converted by the liver into triglycerides and packaged into very low-density lipoprotein particles, which are then released into the bloodstream. After 50, insulin sensitivity declines as part of normal aging, and this process becomes progressively less efficient. Triglycerides accumulate between meals and between days rather than being fully cleared. Over time, chronically elevated triglycerides damage the arterial wall, reduce the size of HDL particles, and increase the concentration of small dense LDL, which is the form of LDL most strongly associated with arterial plaque formation. This is why a normal LDL reading on a standard cholesterol panel does not guarantee cardiovascular safety. A person eating 3 servings of refined carbohydrates per day can have a completely normal LDL number while simultaneously having high triglycerides, low HDL, and a pattern of small, dense LDL that places them at significant risk for a cardiac event. The standard lipid panel does not distinguish between large, buoyant LDL, which is relatively benign, and small, dense LDL, which is not. If your doctor has not run a triglyceride test or a more detailed lipoprotein panel, request one at your next appointment. Therefore, the most important number for your heart may be one your doctor has never mentioned to you, and the food at number 4 explains why some of the most health-conscious people in this room may have been making a dangerous mistake for the last 2 decades without ever knowing it. Food number 4, margarine and partially hydrogenated oils. Here is the clinical term, atherosclerosis. It is the progressive narrowing and hardening of your arteries caused by the accumulation of plaque on the arterial walls. Plaque is composed of cholesterol, calcium, cellular debris, and fibrous tissue that forms at sites of endothelial injury. As it builds, the interior of the artery narrows. Blood flow decreases. The heart has to work harder to push blood through the constricted passage. And when a piece of that plaque ruptures, the clot that forms to seal the rupture can block the artery entirely, producing a heart attack. Among all dietary contributors to atherosclerosis ever studied in controlled human research, artificially produced trans fats, specifically those found in margarine, vegetable shortening, and any product made with partially hydrogenated oils, are the most direct and consistently documented dietary cause of accelerated atherosclerosis in the scientific literature. The evidence is not subtle. A Harvard University study led by Dr. Walter Willett tracked over 80,000 women enrolled in the Nurses' Health Study across a 14-year period. The findings were unambiguous. Every 2% increase in daily calories from trans fats raised the risk of heart disease by 23%. To put that in practical terms, 2% of a 2,000 calorie daily diet is 40 calories, which is approximately 4 grams of trans fat. That is roughly what you would find in 2 tablespoons of standard margarine. The mechanism by which trans fats damage your cardiovascular system is more fundamental than simply raising LDL, cholesterol, which they also do. Trans fats are incorporated directly into your cell membranes. Every cell in your body is surrounded by a lipid bilayer, a double layer of fatty acids that controls what enters and exits the cell and how the cell communicates with its environment. When trans fats are incorporated into this membrane, they alter its fluidity and its function. The cells in your arterial wall, including the endothelial cells that produce nitric oxide and regulate blood flow, begin to malfunction. This effect persists long after you stop consuming trans fats. Research shows it takes months of complete elimination for cell membranes to begin returning to normal composition. The Food and Drug Administration officially classified partially hydrogenated oils as not generally recognized as safe and banned them from the food supply in 2018. But a critical loophole remains in current labeling law. Any product that contains less than half a gram of trans fat per serving can legally display zero trans fat on the nutrition facts label. Manufacturers responded to this loophole by reducing serving sizes, not by eliminating trans fats from their formulas. If a serving size is defined as 1 tablespoon and you use 3 tablespoons, you have consumed up to 1.5 grams of trans fat from a product whose label displays a zero. The only reliable way to identify trans fats in packaged food is to read the ingredient list, not the nutrition panel. Look for the words partially hydrogenated. If those words appear anywhere in the ingredient list, the product contains trans fats regardless of what the nutrition label says. This applies to crackers, cookies, microwave popcorn, coffee creamers, refrigerated dough products, and many packaged baked goods that are still widely sold today. Food number 5, added sugar. Not the sugar found naturally in an apple or a handful of blueberries. Not the fructose bound inside a whole piece of fruit that arrives with fiber, water, vitamins, and phytonutrients that slow its absorption. The sugar that has been extracted from its source and added to processed food during manufacturing. It appears on ingredient lists as high fructose corn syrup, cane sugar, brown sugar, dextrose, maltose, evaporated cane juice, fruit juice concentrate, and over 50 other names, and it is present in the vast majority of packaged foods, including many that are marketed as savory rather than sweet. A 15-year prospective study published in JAMA Internal Medicine followed over 30,000 American adults and measured the relationship between added sugar consumption and cardiovascular mortality. The results were unambiguous. People who consumed 25% or more of their daily calories from added sugar were more than twice as likely to die from cardiovascular disease as those who consumed less than 10%. The lead researcher, Dr. Kwanhei Yang of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, stated explicitly that the association was significant and independent of body weight, physical activity level, total calorie intake, and overall diet quality. Thin, active, otherwise health-conscious people who consumed high amounts of added sugar died from heart disease at the same elevated rate as people with multiple other risk factors who consumed the same amount. The sugar was the variable that determined the outcome. The average American currently consumes approximately 17 teaspoons of added sugar per day. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 6 teaspoons per day for women and 9 teaspoons per day for men. That gap is not a modest overage that adds up gradually over decades. For women, it is nearly triple the recommended daily maximum, sustained 365 days a year. After 50, the mechanism by which added sugar damages your cardiovascular system becomes more aggressive for several reasons. First, added sugar, particularly fructose, drives the liver to produce very low-density lipoprotein particles at an accelerated rate, raising triglycerides in the bloodstream. Second, high sugar consumption chronically elevates insulin, which over time promotes the accumulation of visceral fat, the metabolically active fat that accumulates around the organs inside the abdominal cavity rather than under the skin. Visceral fat is not inert. It secretes a continuous stream of inflammatory signaling molecules called cytokines directly into the portal bloodstream, which flows straight to the liver. Those cytokines promote systemic inflammation, which accelerates endothelial damage, which accelerates atherosclerosis. This is why 2 people with identical body weights can have dramatically different cardiovascular risk profiles depending on where their body fat is distributed and how much added sugar their diet contains. Third, after 50, your kidneys become less efficient at managing the fluid imbalances that chronic sugar consumption produces, making the blood pressure effects of a high sugar diet more pronounced than they would have been at 30 or 40. The foods that carry the most hidden added sugar are not always the ones that taste sweet. Flavored yogurt commonly contains between 12 and 25 grams of added sugar per serving. Barbecue sauce contains between 10 and 15 grams per 2 tablespoons. Bottled salad dressings contain between 5 and 12 grams per serving. Pasta sauces from a jar contain between 6 and 12 grams per half cup. Sports drinks, vitamin waters, and flavored Protein drinks regularly exceed 20 grams per bottle. A person who eats no candy, no dessert, and no soda can still consume 60 to 80 grams of added sugar per day without recognizing it. Tonight, before you do anything else, open your refrigerator and your pantry and check the nutrition label on every packaged product you use on a regular basis. Find the line that reads added sugars, not total sugars, added sugars. That is the number that reflects what was put into the food during manufacturing, separate from anything that occurs naturally. Any single product that shows more than 10 grams of added sugars per serving is contributing meaningfully to the cardiovascular risk that builds silently over years of daily exposure. Make a list. Tomorrow, find one. Replacement for the highest item on it. That single substitution, repeated once a week for the next 2 months, will change the trajectory of what your arteries look like at 65.